This coin is called a crown. A crown can be either a considerable payment in silver, or it can be a symbol that we use to acknowledge someone as king. Today's reading concerns a payment made and a king betrayed. Our reading is taken from Luke chapter 22, verses 1 to 6. Now the feast of unleavened bread drew near, which is called the Passover. And the chief priests and scribes were seeking how to put him to death, for they feared the people. Then Satan entered into Judas, called Iscariot, who was of the number of the 12. He went away and conferred with the chief priests and officers how he might betray him to them. And they were glad and agreed to give him money. So he consented and sought an opportunity to betray him to them in the absence of a crowd. In this passage, we consider the events which lead up to the betrayal of Jesus. Over the 3 years of his ministry, Jesus had become a touchstone for the ordinary people. He had not only addressed their physical and spiritual needs, but in so doing had increasingly challenged the insensitivity, corruption, and hypocrisy of the Jewish leaders. His following had grown dramatically over that time, culminating in the outpouring of adulation and show of affection with which the people had greeted his entry into Jerusalem. They saw him as the long foretold Messiah, their saviour, but in political, not spiritual terms. They believed that he would overthrow the Roman occupation and usher in a new order in Israel. The chief priests and scribes were the leaders of the established church and the spiritual intermediaries and intercessors on behalf of the people, and accountable before God. But they had long abused their power and position for their own benefit and purposes. As Jesus' popularity grew, so too had their anxiety and concern. Their attempts to establish a basis on which to ridicule and undermine his ministry had repeatedly backfired as he turned their own words back on them. They were desperate to find a solution to the threat that they believed Jesus now posed to their authority. So troublesome had Jesus now become, they conspired to find a way to remove him by force and, if necessary, by death. What they were now concerned with was how, when, and where this would be undertaken. And what of Judas? The leaders feared that any attempt to openly challenge Jesus would result in an uprising. So, enter Judas Iscariot, Satan's selected vehicle to facilitate the death of Jesus and bring down God's plan to restore man's broken relationship with God. It was Judas who gave the chief priests the break they were looking for. As a disciple of Jesus, one of the close inner circle of the 12, he knew Jesus well. He was on the inside, unsuspected by the other disciples, and close enough to know Jesus' habits, his plans, and his forthcoming movements. He offered the chief priests a plan on a plate, a plan to betray Jesus out of sight of the crowds, in a location and at a time where there were few of his disciples with him to cause any threat or bother. Yes, it would cost the chief priests some blood money, and for Judas it would be a just reward for his efforts, but it was worth it to make the problem disappear, or so they thought. It was a simple plan, straightforward, free of any potential future complications, a done deal. What could possibly go wrong?